Hi, welcome back to the channel and thank you for joining me. So today this is something, it's taken a bit of getting my head around how to do this and how to deal with this, but it's been something that I've been asked for over and over again, and I've threatened to do over and over again. So today what I'm going to do is talk about my favourite Yes albums, and I will sort of, I'll kind of end the video with a top 10, which is sat over here, but I've got piles and piles of records all across the table here, which I want to just sort of go through, because whilst I've got my top 10, there's also a pile of what I would say are honourable mentions, and also some very worth considering solo albums or albums that are kind of by a band that aren't actually called Yes, if you know what I mean. Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman Howe, for instance. I haven't listed that as a yes because well, strictly speaking, they're not. Anyway, so I'm gonna go through a whole bunch of records. I mean, I haven't got everything that they've ever released on vinyl, but I nearly have. There's only a couple that I haven't. Live from Lyon is one that springs to mind. I've got it on CD. I've heard it. It's it just doesn't attract me enough to want to spend north of £100, which is what it seems to be going for. Anything between £100 and £200 for a copy. And I don't really want it that much. So what I'm going to start off with, I'm going to kick off with kind of this pile here. Okay, now the first one on top of this pile is the most recent release, which is why it's top of the pile, because I've pulled these out of the rack, which is stored chronologically. And anyway, let's just dive in. So Yes, Yale Bowl 71. Now, it was a record store day release this year, and as I've already explained, the sound quality is dire, but the music is phenomenal. So don't buy this if you're an audiophile that can't listen to kind of compromised, dodgy lo-fi recordings. But if a lo-fi recording of phenomenal music doesn't bother you, this is worth having. Okay, so I'm just going to run through these really quickly. This is kind of, this isn't the honourable mentions, but these are just things that I think we'll talk about. So this is a recent studio album. Studio albums are fairly thin on the ground from Yes these days, but it didn't float my boat particularly. And now here we've got Yes 50 Live. What is it, a 4-record set? Yeah, a 4-record set. And this was done to sort of celebrate their 50th anniversary about 5 years ago, and it's something of a theme that will sort of unfold. I'm going to whistle through these quite quickly, because this is what I call the New John era. Okay. And I'm sure Yes fans will know entirely what I mean by New John versus John. This is John Davidson on vocals, who replaced John Anderson, who was the John Anderson for me is along with Chris Squire pretty much an essential element of Yes, but there's some honourable mentions that don't feature John. So this isn't one of them. This is just, unfortunately, I love Yes so much, I kind of can't not buy them. This is kind of a mini album, and this is an interesting one, because this is one of only 2 that I have on vinyl, and 3, including the Live on Lyon, that features Benoit David, who's a Canadian singer who was, I think we could say, the second replacement for John Anderson. I thought he did a pretty good job actually, but it's kind of funny because he's almost being erased from history by the powers that are these days. It's an interesting thing, but you know, that's not bad. It's not bad stuff. And then here we got quite a run of albums. These are all New John live albums. This one here is with Billy Sherwood on bass. So this is after the very sad passing of Chris Squire, who, as I already mentioned, is one of those. Chris Squire is one of the absolute key elements, and when we get up into the top 10, I think we'll go across that quite a lot more. And here we are. We've just got more and more and more of these things. This one has got Chris Squire, and here we go again. And what these typically on these albums, they're sort of, this is the New John era, but they're touring and doing an album. So this tour was going for the One and the Yes album. So you pretty much got, it's a double album. I mean, going for the One, Turn of the Century, Parallels, Wondrous Stories, Awaken. Disc 1 literally is going for the One in order. And Disc 2 literally is the Yes album in order. But, performed live and with, Chris Squire, Steve Howe on bass and guitar, Alan White on drums. Obviously, it would have been Bill Bruford on the Yes album. Jeff Downes on keyboards, and we'll get a bit onto him in later on. Ironically, actually, that's why I'm wearing this shirt. I don't actually have a Yes t-shirt, but I didn't buy this shirt because Jeff Downes was wearing it. But I bought this shirt quite a long time ago now. And then I've subsequently seen Jeff Downes wearing the same shirt on stage. So it's kind of my Yes shirt, if you like. And anyway, and then John Davison, New John, on vocals. Heaven and Earth. This is another of the very rare thing that are new studio albums or studio albums with New John. And it's, it's okay, but it's not great in my opinion. Magnification is an interesting one because this is one of the last albums with John Anderson, and we don't have a keyboard player on this album if memory serves me right. What we have is an orchestra, and it's an interesting album, and I think worth a listen, but it doesn't make the top 10. And then just rattling through here, these are sort of, what's this, late 90s, The Ladder. It's, I can't remember the lineup on this one, to be perfectly honest, but it comes, I think, after Union. Let me just tell you that. Now, Union's an interesting one, because Union's kind of where all of the past members, with the exception of Trevor Horn and Peter Banks, I think all of the previous members of Yes all got together for some massive, great big Yes fest. Now I've got friends who went to the gig, see this live, and they thought it was pretty magnificent because a big Yes fest. It's not my favourite thing. It's not, to me. It's not. No, it's not. So it doesn't make the top 10. And then we're going back a little bit further. This is Trevor Rabin era Yes, which those of you who saw my video on 90125 recently, which I should put a link to up here. Trevor Rabin is actually I'm not overly keen, frankly. So this is the same lineup as 90125, and the album that comes next in my no thank you list, which is Big Generator, which is I would say this is the first album chronologically going through Yes that I really it just didn't hit any kind of, it didn't hit the spot for me at all. Now the next one, now this did kind of hit the spot at the time, probably because I think this was the first new album once I'd actually got into Yes. I first got into Yes, I think the first thing I ever heard was Wondrous Stories on Top of the Pops when it was a single. Got Going for the One, which absolutely blew my mind, and we'll get to Going for the One much later on. This was the next album. I didn't see them on this tour, but I did see them. Shortly there afterwards. But I think we can see here. There's John Anderson's signature there, Steve Howe, Alan White. I got this signed, and it's definitely not my favourite album. It doesn't make the top 10, but because of where I was in life when this album came out, for a little while it did sort of really excite me. I never ever preferred it to Going for the One, but I went down to Yes Tour, which is where this place is in Devon. I sort of went on pilgrimages. I was a very impressionable sort of young teenager at the time, so it's here, but it doesn't make the top 10. And now I want to get into the honourable mentions, and this pile of records here, these would be, if I was doing a top 20, they may well be in it. They probably would be in it, to be perfectly honest. So the first one of these I want to mention is Drama. Now, Drama was their 1980 album release. So the first studio album after Tomato, which I've already mentioned, and Tomato, it came out when I was sort of young and impressionable, but whilst there are some half decent tracks on there, there's nothing that's even close to peak level. Yes, nothing close. Shock and horror of this one is John Anderson had left the band, and so had Rick Wakeman. So what we have here is basically Buggles, which is Trevor Horn and Jeff Downes. Jeff Downes of the Cool Shirt fame, of course, have joined on vocals and keyboards. And we've still got Alan White, Chris Squire and Steve Howe. Now, I saw them on this tour, and the first thing I'd like to point out is that, Trevor Horn is no John Anderson. There's no one, in my opinion, compares with John Anderson. If you want the best John Anderson impression, I would say Benoit David, which we'll get to in a minute. A little bit more detail about. Does a good John Anderson impersonation, but what this is it takes, whereas with Tomato, it had got a little bit sickly, a little bit twee, it wasn't really challenging. What we got here is musically, it really kind of like fires on all cylinders again. It's sort of like, it's got a bit of sort of, V8 muscle to it. It's gritty, it's powerful, it's engaging. It's not bad stuff. So Drama, whilst not in the top 10, would definitely be in the top 20. Okay. And now this is several years after Drama, because I think Drama was 1980, and this was 2011. And this is another album that's almost, you won't find it on Q-Buzz, which is really confusing. I'm actually going to bring up here. I've got, goodness knows why I've got two copies of that. I must have, I think I was mistakenly thinking they'd remastered it or recut it. So I bought another copy several years after the original copy, only to find it was just you know, same pressing, just more stock. But I'm going to put that one down for now. So Fly From Here, it supersedes a whole sort of, you know, a raft of the sort of mid-period Yes, and actually returns to the lineup of Drama. Okay, and I would say it's actually got good songs. I think the songwriting on Fly From Here is, you know, it really does follow on from Drama. And there's an awful lot of albums, all the Magnifications and the Ladder and Union and, you know, Talk and all the rest of them. I kind of think that the writing just wasn't as good. And Fly From Here, it's got, for starters, you've got side one is a side-long kind of epic. And then 5 tracks on side 2. And it's, you know, it's not my favourite album, but it is actually strangely compelling. And I would say this is the most played album post 90125. Okay? So this is my most played Yes album post 90125. And what you may ask is Fly From Here Return Trip. Right, okay, so this was 2011, this was 2018. So 7 years after releasing this, basically Trevor Horn, he produced both versions, but Trevor Horn kind of went back to the mix, the masters, the multi-tracks, re-recorded a vocal part with him singing as he was on Drama. So yeah, correction, this is the same lineup as Drama. This is the same lineup as Drama, with the exception you've got this guy Benoit David on vocals. So basically it's the same album, but with you know, Benoit David's parts re-recorded by Trevor Horn. Now, to be brutally honest, I can't really pick between them, you know, which one I prefer. It's swings and roundabouts, but it's nevertheless it's kind of interesting, and that, like I say, it's why did they bother doing that, and why is this not on Qbuzz? And I don't know, it just feels like Benoit David's being written out of history, which is a very strange thing to happen. Anyway, other honourable mentions. Now this is the first of the live albums that could possibly have made the top 10. It was a very close thing. I'm sure most of you will know this is a pretty tatty old copy, but it's, you know, it's been around a long time and it's been to some gigs. It's a triple album with a lovely booklet, and okay, so here we've got Alan White, Chris Squire, Steve Howe. Chris Squire signed it twice, fantastic, and John Anderson signed on the back there. So you know, this has been to a few gigs, hence why it's a little bit tatty, but a superb album, triple live album. But just for the record, and my top 10, I did think, should I make it studio albums only? And I decided not to. And, you know, just give a little spoiler alert, maybe, there is one live album in my top 10. So this is not my favourite Yes live album. While we're on the subject of that, I'll just jump to this. So I haven't got the Goodness How Many Albums box set of this, but this is basically the same tour as Yes songs, but other nights, because basically they compiled, you know, the best recordings of each track from, you know, they don't list on here which what nights, you know, each track is on, whereas they do on here. But basically I think there's I don't know, I mean 20 album set, 20 LP set, 21 LP set, something like that, of various nights on this tour, just like the whole concert, night after night after night. And you know, even that was just a bit much for me. But this is, this is great. It's it's nicely mixed and mastered and everything else. I think probably digitally mastered and mixed, being these days, or digitally produced. But I prefer Yes songs. But there's more of that. Now the last honourable mentions before we get to before we get to the next honourable mentions is this one, Yesterday's. Again, I don't quite know why I've got 2 copies of this. I must have had 3 because I know for a fact I had a signed copy. I got it signed myself. I mean, all my signed copies are signed in person when I've met these wondrous fellows at gigs. But Yesterday's was quite an interesting one for me because it introduced me to the really early Yes, and I didn't really understand where and how and why this all fitted in. So we've got here we are, side 1. Now there's one thing about this which kind of makes this an essential, even well, in my book, even though it doesn't make the top 10. So basically it's a compilation album. It was released in 74, I think, 75. But it's a compilation album made up of tunes off of the first 2 albums before the Yes album, which are definitely kind of overlooked by most Yes fans, I would say. But interestingly enough, they also include a cover version of the Paul Simon song America. Now, they if you're a folkie who really loves Paul Simon, you may think they've absolutely murdered this. I think it's absolutely bloody magnificent. They completely turn it into a prog masterpiece. If you look at the lineup here, we've got Rick Wakeman on keyboards, but also Bill Bruford on drums. So this will have been recorded before the departure of before the departure of Bill Bruford, but after the joining of Rick Wakeman. So we're kind of talking Fragile, Close to the Edge time. The rest of them are the first band, which is John Anderson, Chris Squire, of course, Bill Bruford on drums, who stayed around until Close to the Edge, and Tony Kaye on organ, who stayed around until the Yes album, left after that. But Peter Banks on guitar, who was just there for these first 2 albums. He preceded Steve Howe in the band. Anyway, I will come back to that, but it gives you a nice taster of the first couple of albums, and it certainly whet my appetite. Yesterday's, worth looking out. Now, I just finally, before I get to the top 10, what I want to talk about now is this is just a little pile of stuff here now. This is stuff that I've recently got that I haven't even listened to yet. So we got Steve Howe Beginnings, which is obviously solo album by Steve. This I bought last year, just like, they've done a new release, crystal clear vinyl of Fragile, and I never even got around to opening it, frankly. This is yet more of these. I haven't played it yet. I have actually opened this one, but this is yet more of these sort of more modern, what I call new John Yes, which like every single year they seem to release a live album, and again this one is 2020, I think. So yeah, basically we haven't got Alan White. No, we've got Alan White. So I saw them around this time where they had Alan White and Jay Shellen on drums. Not all the time. They'd wheel Alan White out for a few bits and bobs, but Jay Shellen did most of the drumming, and Billy Sherwood on bass. So this is after Chris Squire's passing, but just more of the same. And I keep buying this stuff, and I really ought to. Frankly, I really ought to stop. Okay, and then this is their most recent studio album. And I've listened to it on Qbuzz. It's okay, it's decent stuff, but it's not. It is not classic, yes, by any stretch of the imagination. So that's it. We've got, a few little mentions there. Now, these are solo albums or albums that aren't billed as Yes albums. Now, first one, Chris Squire. This is his first solo album. I think it was 1975. He recorded this, and it's got Bill Bruford on drums. It's a good Yesy kind of record. If I was including this within the whole, the sphere, none of these in this pile would make the top 10. The top 10 is pretty much set in stone where they're at. But I think this might sneak into the top 20, 25. I think there's a good chance of that. This one probably wouldn't. This is John Anderson and Michael Stolt. It's an unusual album, but it's really quite nice and quite interesting. So again, it's lesser known, but one I would look out. Next, we've got one which probably everyone who's into Yes knows. For some reason, again, I've got 2 copies of it. And this is where, this was around the time of 90125 when Rick Wakeman and John Anderson and Steve Howe kind of left, when you got, instead of, Anderson went back. When you had the sort of the Buggles take over the drama thing, it was all very, very fluid and in flux there, and it was, it was almost Pink Floyd-esque in the sort of the, who's going to be called what, and who can call themselves Yes, and ultimately this band and the Yes band, or most of the Yes band at the time, came together on the Union album, and you had this massive, great big kind of thing going on, which I think sounds better on paper than it is in reality, but. Good music, and it's got Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman and Howe. So with the exception of Chris Squire, we've got, the lineup that performed on Fragile and Close to the Edge. So no mean thing by any imagination. Now this one here, Song of Seven. So I went to see John Anderson on this tour, and I thought it was wonderful. Very, very beautiful. It's lovely music. It's very John Anderson. Now, I met John out the back before the gig, and he was so charming. He introduced me to his wife and family, asked me where I was sitting in the auditorium. And when I sort of showed him my ticket with the seat number on it, he actually had a spare that was in a better position with his little family group, the slap bang in the middle of the centre front 2 rows. So he swapped tickets with me because they had a spare. So I got to sit with his family, basically slap bang in the middle, second row in fact, but literally right behind his wife, which was well cool. And he even gave me a nod during the performance, which was kind of super, super, super cool. But wonderful, 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 wonderful guy, and a nice album. Not my favourite John. Well, no, it's not my favourite solo John album, but I'm kind of going back chronologically here. And again, this one, John and Vangelis, it's worth a mention, and I think this is my favourite of the John and Vangelis albums. Okay, Friend of Mr. Cairo is the title track is definitely full on prog. There's rumours that they wanted Vangelis or John wanted Vangelis to join Yes. Sort of around the time that Patrick Moraz joined. Whether that rumour's true or not, I don't know. But I think it could have worked out quite well. Obviously, Vangelis was part of Aphrodite's Child, which was, again, a sort of, slightly off people's mainstream map, but really, really worth seeking out prog. Okay? And then the next one here, funny enough, I remember the day this was released because it was around that same time that I got into music and buying records. I can remember the W.H. Smiths in Winchester where I used to live. There was a massive sort of 3D, about 4 foot square version of this, and this one is signed by John Anderson, although it's black on black, so you can hardly see it. But this had the single I Hear You Now, which was just, you know, it's not Yes, but bloody beautiful music nevertheless. And then the last one in this little section of solo kind of worthy mentions, again, let me see, Best Wishes, John Anderson on there. Elias of Sun Hilo. Now this is John's first solo thing, and it's magnificent. There's rumours that Vangelis is helping out with some of the musicianship on this, but the only credits are actually to John himself, I think. But if you just, it's full on prog, wonderful sort of, you know, fantastic fantasy story, and you can just see here from the cover and the, you know, the words, the way it's illustrated, it is, it's just beautiful, and the music is utterly captivating and beautiful. It's an amazing thing, and I would, you know, any prog fan, Yes fan who doesn't know this, go and have a listen. And, you know, if you're into vinyl and prog and Yes, and you haven't got this, you know, get the LP, get the vinyl LP, because what a beautiful cover, and you can sit there and read the story as we go through. It's beautiful stuff. Right, let me just pop this one away. So, I'll stick these down here, hang on. You can see this pile, it's about 1.5 foot high now. Now, that little pile here is just audiophile repressings of my top 10. But before we dive into the top 10, and I'm sorry if this video's dragging on, but there we go. It was that was an inevitable happening, I think. Here we go, into the top 10. Now, at number 10, this is the live album that I have not mentioned so far. Now, this again, it came out quite, you know, bearing in mind the first Yes I heard was I'm Going for the One, 1977. This came out in 1980. So it was, I think we had, in my sort of contemporary experience of Yes, we had Going for the One, which had been released, you know, sort of a year prior to my, you know, or the year I first heard it. But it was already out. Then we had Tomato, which excited me being a teenager, but, you know, it wasn't the best album they'd done by a long way. And then we had this, and this was pretty bloody special. So by the point in time this had come out, I'd worked my way through the back catalogue, and I'd got Yes songs, and you know, several of the earlier albums, but not all of them. But this one has got, for starters, we've got side one, Parallels, Time in a Word, Going for the One. You know, half of the album Going for the One live, but with, you know, the real band, so to speak. So, you know, there's some lovely pictures in here, but we've, you know, Parallels, Squire, Anderson, Howe, Wakeman and White. So this is all basically sort of recorded in 1977, 78, with the exception of The Gates of Delirium, which was recorded in 76 with Patrick Moraz on keyboards. Okay. But it's interesting because it's, you know, there's a couple of things of interest here. Well, first of all, we've got Time and a Word, which is off their second album, which at this point in time I'd not even heard of, probably, let alone heard. And the other thing we had the single Don't Kill the Whale, which I did get as a single at the time, but I don't think that was on any album. You know, that's kind of by the by. But it had that, but it also had a side-long version of The Gates of Delirium, and it had Ritual or Nous Sommes du Soleil from Tales of Topographic Oceans on it. And as I say, it's got, you know, Parallels, Going for the One, and Wondrous Stories off of the Going for One album. So it was, you know, this was firing on all cylinders for me at the time, and it blew me away. I loved it. Okay, so number 10. I'll leave these up here. Coming in at number 9, I'm sure some of you are quite surprised to see how low down this is. Now this one here as I already mentioned, I recently did a review of this Analog Productions Atlantic 75th, which blows this out the water. Absolutely it does. But this is my original, and you know, that's kind of what I'm talking about here. But the new one is blows it out the water. But anyway, a phenomenal album. Great to have John Anderson back in the band after having Trevor Horn on vocals, but you've still got Trevor Horn production. But we've lost Steve Howe and we've got Trevor Rabin on guitar, which it makes them more of a kind of a, you know, straight up and down sort of, you know, sort of more rigid square kind of rock band rather than you know, kind of free flowing kind of, you know, polymorphing kind of prog thing. So, you know, brilliant music, but great, but not altogether great. Okay, so number 9, Yes 90125. Now this is one that for the first 20 years probably of my being into Yes, it wouldn't have been on my map. But here we have Time and a Word, and this is a UK original, as you can see on the Red and Plum label. Now this was their second album, released in '69, I think, 1970. So we got the band here is John Anderson, Chris Squire, Tony Kaye, Peter Banks and Bill Bruford. So with the exception of Peter Banks on guitar in place of Steve Howe on guitar, it's the same lineup as the Yes album. And they're a young band kind of forging their sound, but there's something about the energy and the boogie and the groove and the funkiness and the raw energy of this lineup of the band it's exceptional. You know, it really, really, really is. You can find on YouTube videos from stuff from this era. The second track then is which is a John Anderson composition, is I'm pretty sure there is a video for that online. If I can find a link to it, I'll pop it up here. But it's, you know, they are something else at this era. They really, really, really are. I would say they're less kind of polished prog, but they have got energy and passion and you know, and talent. That's the point. Talent aplenty. So that comes in at 8. Okay. Now number 7, and this is where we get. So this is kind of an interesting thing, because one of the ways I thought about how I'm going to do this is I thought, well, let's take out albums that at some point in time would have been my favourite Yes album. And there was a point in time where this was my favourite Yes album. So this is 1974. This is the album that follows Tales from Topographic Oceans and precedes Going for the One. And it's the only album with Patrick Moraz on keyboards. So that's Patrick Moraz here. And it's, I mean, there was a period in time where The Gates of Delirium, which is the entirety of side 1, was my favourite Yes track. I absolutely loved it. Patrick Moraz is a lot more jazzy than either Tony Kaye or Rick Wakeman. And if you look at live concert footage at the time, whilst I think the material off this, Gates of Delirium, Sound Chaser and To Be Over, Patrick plays great. You know, the band is, they just don't even know what to do with the old catalogue stuff. So watch it out of interest. But this is a great album. I prefer it to the ones that I've already mentioned. But this comes in at number 6, Relayer, which is kind of the classic lineup, but with Moraz instead of Wakeman. If we think of the classic lineup being the longest serving lineup in the 70s, I think, of Squire, Howell, White, Anderson and Wakeman. Interesting thing on here. Right, okay, so this is correct. Squire, Howell, White, Anderson, Moraz. If you look at the picture here, there are many issues of this where these names are in a different order. They basically get muddled up. So that's an interesting one to look out for. But there we go. So coming in at number 7, we have Relayer. Now, coming in at number 6. And again, I think this one will surprise some people, but no matter how I look at it, I can't deny this. You know, we've got some cover versions. There's Every Little Thing, which is the Beatles song. We've got I See You, which I think was the Byrds, and the rest of it are their own compositions. But the energy of this, the sound of this, it's you put this on and there is everything that, you know, it is like, it's a bit like listening to From Genesis to Revelation, the Genesis album, first album. You can hear what's to come by listening to this album, but it is, I mean, it is just, you put it on, Beyond and Before. Listen to the first track, and you've got Bill Bruford's drumming. I think on this album you've got Bill Bruford's drumming better than anything that I think Alan White did. You've got Chris Squire's bass sounding just unbelievable. It is, and Anderson's vocal too. He's still got that kind of really husky, smoky kind of Lancashire accent. I absolutely love it, and it's got the energy of, you know, this album, Time and a Word, and the Yes album. These are phenomenal records, and I absolutely love this. They are on fire, and this is, you know, in my opinion, a very worthy number 6. Okay. Now, number 5, and again, I think this is going to surprise some people that it's this far down the list. But number 5 is Fragile. And just for those of you who don't know, this is what a UK original looked like with this booklet in here. Sometimes this booklet was separate and sometimes it was stapled in. I've seen, in fact I've had both. But a wonderful album. I know many people's Plum and Red again, that's the original. Many people's favourite, I believe. And there are, I mean, Roundabout, South Side of the Sky, Long Distance Runaround, and Heart of the Sunrise. Those tracks are staggering. What makes this, for me, not sit higher up the list is basically Cans and Brahms, We Have Heaven, 5% of Nothing, and less so The Fish and Mood for a Day. I say less so. Basically, you've got 4 phenomenal kind of group compositions or group performances, if you like. And then you've got 4, is that right? 4 or 5 solo pieces. So Cans of Brahms is a Wakeman interpretation of some Brahms classical stuff. We Have Heaven is a sort of pretty much, it's almost sort of, you know, Anderson sort of overlaying vocal kind of a cappella type of thing, which is actually really beautiful. 5% of Nothing. It's very short. It's you know, it's interesting and cool and groovy. I mean, all of these things are nice, but for me, they kind of break up the album. And if we're judging it just as an album, as a complete thing, they make it a little disjointed for me. And you know, The Fish, which is Chris Squire's sort of solo, and Howell's Mood for a Day, they're all beautiful, but they, you know, they don't perfectly sort of work for me in the context of an entire album. They're sort of palate cleansers between the, you know, the Roundabout, South Side of the Sky, Long Distance Runaround, and Heart of the Sunrise. I mean, Heart of the Sunrise, Roundabout, I mean, they are, you know, they are amongst the best Yes songs ever. Anyway, next up, this is number 4. And here we are. The first Yes album I got, Going for the One. This possibly could have even come up higher. Every single track on here, Going for the One, Turn of the Century, Parallels, Wondrous Stories, and Awaken. Every single track is phenomenal in my book. And that's, you know, in that way, it's more balanced than, for instance, Fragile, I think, where you've got this phenomenal track, coupled, then a sort of little ditty almost, then a phenomenal track, then another little ditty. I mean, this is phenomenal. It really is. It's the classic sort of line-up with Wakeman on keyboards and White on drums. And it's got Awaken on it, which is just, you know, again, for many, you know, years, Awaken was my favourite all-time Yes song. Phenomenal epic. Wondrous Stories was the single that got me into Yes. And actually, Turn of the Century again is an absolute beautiful, you know, almost like Wondrous Stories, just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful piece of music. It's passionate, it's colourful, it's wonderful. The only thing that I don't like about this is actually the kind of the recording I find a bit bright. You know, I'd love to, you know, have the, you know, go back to the multi-track and remix this, and you know, if possible. But it's, you know, Going for the One, my number 4. Okay, so number 3. Now this one I know is so often number 1 on so many people's lists, but for me, it's number 3, and that's only because I think there's 2 albums that are even better. Now this is a UK original, which is kind of got a leather texture to the cover, and you know, just for those who haven't seen one, there's your inner. So you know, enough's been said about this. Side 1, Close to the Edge, a side-long epic. Side 2 is Siberian Catru and You and I. Both phenomenal, both beautiful, and this is the last album to feature Bill Bruford on drums, and you know, it's many people's number 1, and I can well understand why it would be many people's number 1. Anyone who thought it was their favourite album, I certainly wouldn't argue with it. You know, it is absolutely phenomenal. It's just, for me personally, there are 2 that I prefer. Okay, now interestingly enough, that's an original. I've also had this since the 1980s, so a long time. And I've possibly even played this more. So, you know, again, I kind of know that one almost more. Okay, and I mean, actually, I ought to mention when I was when we got to the Fragile a little while ago. I've also got that one, but much as this is an interesting listen, I think I've only played it a few times, handful of times, 3 or 4 at most. I am very, very, very keen to hear what Atlantic 75th Analog Productions version sounds like. Similarly with Close to the Edge, my only concern with Close to the Edge is, you know, you've got to split it halfway through the title track, Close to the Edge. So here we are on to the top 2. Avid Yes fans will be thinking, oh my goodness, he's got that one and that one in there, surely. So number 2, which will, I'm sure, reveal what number 1 is to those who really know their stuff. Number 2 is the Yes album, and I did a video on that not very long ago at all, because this has literally just come out, and it's absolutely blows away the original. This is just absolutely, utterly stunning. If this hadn't come out, would this have been above Close to the Edge and Going for the One? It's really, honestly, it's hard to say, because this is so damn good. I think it probably would, but it's, I mean, this is you know, I'll let me get back to talking about this. So this is the same band. Well, no, this is the only time this band features, if you like, because before this we had Peter Banks instead of Steve Howe, and after this we had Rick Wakeman instead of Tony Kaye. So this is actually, you know, a unique lineup for this album, but it is like those first two albums, Yes and Time and a Word, that featured Tony Kaye on organ rather than, you know, the vast multi-dimensional skills of Rick Wakeman on many keyboards. It gives a funkiness and a sort of a dynamic kind of boogie to this, which is on those first two albums. John's voice is still kind of quite husky. It's just, and every single track on it. I mean, I mentioned on a previous video, Adventure is probably my least favourite track on this, but it's still, you know, I much prefer Adventure to, for instance, you know, Cans and Brahms or 5% of Nothing or whatever off of Fragile. So a phenomenal album. A phenomenal album. Now, number one. This is going to surprise some people, horrify some people, I'm absolutely no doubt. But here we go. So I've loved this ever since I first got it, and I can't remember exactly the order I've got it, but by the time of my sort of 16th birthday in 1980, I would have got this. And Tales from Topographic Oceans. It's an album that many people absolutely hate. Many Yes fans absolutely hate. I mean, for starters, look at that beautiful cover, okay? I think right from the word go, one of the things that really knocked me out about Yes was their... it was almost like they were, you know... I mean, prog wasn't a word that we used back then. It wasn't a term I'd ever heard. But this was, you know, at the time, I thought of Yes as kind of classic rock or classical rock or symphonic rock. There was a competence, there was a kind of classical structure to the arrangements and the performing virtuosity and all that stuff that reminded me of classical music. And this amazing, phenomenal piece of music, or suite of compositions, whatever you want to call it, just did that more than anything else. And what it is a double album with 4 pieces of music, each one, you know, just over 20 minutes long, each one actually longer than Close to the Edge, I believe. And it's just, it invokes a very passionate, spiritual, you know, like, if you listen to classical music, it's, you know, you don't have lyrics in classical music typically. It's about emotions. There's tons of lyrics in this, but the whole thing starts off with this chant, and the lyrical stuff going on in here, the melodies, the cadences, the swells and the crescendos, and the way it is put together. I mean, I just think it's absolutely beautiful, absolutely staggeringly beautiful. I do prefer sides 1 and 2 to sides 3 and 4, but I wouldn't put out a single album with those. The whole thing has to be, because I think sort of side 4, Nous sommes du soleil, aka Ritual. Each side has kind of got two titles, if you like. So side 1 is The Revealing Science of God. What a cool name for a piece of music. Or Dance of the Dawn. Side 2, The Remembering, High the Memory. Side 3, The Ancient, Giants Under the Sun. And side 4, Ritual, Nous sommes du soleil. If you kind of take the Close to the Edge sort of essence and energy and feeling and sort of spiritual intent, if you like, particularly of the side one of that title track. And then just pull out all the stops and let it go into full on, let it go where it wants to go. Tales from Topographic Oceans is it. And I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. And some of the passages through there are just heart-achingly beautiful. You know, if you know it and you hate it, then you know it and you hate it. I think the real reason for me wanting to do this, apart from the fact I get asked so many times, is because I wanted to sort of present, you know, I mean, this album here, certainly, it doesn't get a lot of love. And other ones that if we go through my top 10, you know, Yes, the first album, and Time and a Word, they don't get a lot of love either. And I just wanted to put, you know, add my two penneth to the mix, so to speak, and explain why, you know, in some degree, why I love this band so damn much, why I've got, you know, I don't know what, 40, 50 LPs here, I've got no idea, a lot. So yeah, this is where it's at for me. My absolute favourite, Tales from Topographic Oceans. Okay, so on that note, I've got no idea how long this video is. I shall upload it and then get editing, and we'll see. But I probably will do a similar thing with Genesis. Please leave your comments. I want to know. I mean, I'm sure I'm going to get an awful lot of feedback about, you know, oh my God, Tales from Topographic Oceans, what a rambling monstrosity. I know, you know, it kind of almost split the band up, but for me, it is, you know, it's just putting it out there. It's taking it to that nth degree. And whilst for many people that was just too much, for me, I love it and I applaud it, and I think that's what Yes is, and it's what Yes is about. And the other thing I think, if I could, you know, if there's one thing that I would like people to take from this, is give those early albums a listen, because they are staggering. You know, the band, you know, it's in its infancy, but my God, are they on fire. On that note, I'll say thank you very much for watching. Catch you all again soon. Bye now. Bye.